The best way to de-stress your dog is to sit quietly with them and do something besides looking at the dog. Read a book, watch a TV show, and just be with them. Don't obsess over them.
I'm Amanda Silver.
And I'm Alex Howard.
And this is Dirty Laundry.
I have very exciting New Year plans.
Wait, what?
So my best friend, her birthday is the 31st of December. So we are celebrating her 40th.
Oh, that's so fun. What are you going to do?
Excited. It's a big party. I don't know. TBD.
Okay, it's in Toronto.
I'm just so excited.
You don't know what it is.
I don't. So normally we end up like going away. We up to like a friend's cottage or something for that kind of in between Christmas and New Year's. And this year we're not doing that. And I'm like, I finally get to hit one of her birthday parties and I'm very excited.
Oh my gosh, you're going to need an outfit. That's going to be so fun.
Ooh, I want sparkly.
Of course. You got to go sparkles.
Yes. What are you doing for New Year's?
So I am going to be in South Beach for New Year's.
Not winning.
Yeah, and so my sister and I are like, we have some friends in South Beach. We're not sure what party we're going to go to, but
you'll do something fun.
I'll do, even just going for dinner and like drinks down there is like
do you
fun.
Normally stay up? Like, do you hit 12 o'clock?
Where do I stay up? I hit 12 o'clock every night.
Okay, forgot.
I was up till 12:45 last night. That's a normal night.
Oh my God.
I'm a late night.
Definitely sleeping by 9:45.
Oh, I know. You go on silent. It bothers me. I know. We'll talk about that with our counselor. I know.
My favorite New Year's was we were once in Palm Springs.
Oh.
And it's 3 years behind. Obviously, California is 3 years. 3
Isn't it though?
Hours behind.
Those retro cars they have still driving around.
3 years behind. So we celebrated at 9 p.m.
Oh, I know. That's the best.
It was amazing.
Right. But my kids will be in California as well. So they'll get to celebrate it. Yeah, at 9 p.m. I mean, my kids can stay up late anyways, but
they're
my New Year's have been all over the place.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've been with the kids and it's very different than when I'm not with the kids. But what I'm always so amazed at, I don't know if it's the same. I'm usually away. I'm usually out of town for New Year's. Is the prices of Ubers on New Year's. So it's usually like 100% surge.
Right.
Which seriously, it says 100% surge.
And like, what does that mean in dollar value?
So it could cost you
double. So like if your trip would be $30, 100% of that's a $30 additional charge.
Yeah, or even more. Sometimes like 125% surge. Like it's insane. So to get an Uber is hard as it is.
Yeah.
But then once you get it, it's like you have to commit. They're like, it's $500. You're like, sure, just take me home.
You know,
like,
I really find lately I've been reverting back to the cabs. For this exact reason.
I can see that.
I hail a cab. There's no surge. They're right there. I don't have to like wait and watch on my phone and them go the wrong fucking way every single time. And you're like yelling at them like it's a one-way street or don't turn that way.
Yeah, I can see that.
I just hop in a cab. Yeah. I've really been enjoying it.
This week on Dirty Laundry, we have pet mediator extraordinaire, Karis Nafte, who is zooming in all the way from South Africa. She spent 30 years as a behavioral expert with dogs. And she is here to talk about pet mediation.
She helps her clients navigate what to do with the dog when they're getting divorced.
And she provides a very interesting perspective because it's not just about what do the humans want, right? It's about what's really best for the dog. So I've got so many questions for her. So welcome. Movies have your dogs been in?
No, nothing fancy, unfortunately, but a lot of commercials and stuff, like little things, background dogs. Yeah.
That is very cool.
They're famous in like random commercials in Europe.
I love it. My mom had dogs once that were in commercials and they loved it. They would get picked up in this like big van and they would get pampered and like groomed.
Did they pay you guys?
Yeah, like quite well. It was like $1,500 for the day.
No.
And they would go on set and like be given treats and grooming and all this stuff. And they'd come home and they'd be exhausted. It was a win.
Paying you to like tire out your dog.
Yeah. I mean, they couldn't do anything. They were there purely just for being cute.
Right.
Which they were exceptionally good at. But the tricks and stuff, I'm always so impressed. We've been trying to teach Lincoln how to sit on his like hind legs and put his front paws up. Nope, can't do it.
Well, he's very cute.
Oh, okay. We have to have I will teach you how to do that because long before I did pet mediation, I was a movie dog trainer. So I can give you all the tips of how to do the meerkat. Yeah, you got to do it.
The meerkat.
Cutest name.
They've got such a long spine. Like it's really easy for like Jack Russells and like strong little squatty dogs to do it. So you have to actually develop their back muscles physically to do it because their spines are so long. That's how they're good, twisty little collies. So until they're strong, they won't be able to actually balance or stand. So I can help you.
Oh my
Whole
gosh,
other
I love
podcast.
this.
Oh yeah, a whole other
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, exactly. So
Dirty
so
laundry
interesting.
goes to the dogs.
So you got into mediation then through the pets, because most folks we talk to get in it through their own divorce. Then they want to help others. You did a complete different take on mediation. I love this. So you started with dogs and you continued with the dogs.
Yep.
That's
I have
so
been
great.
doing, I've been a dog trainer and a dog behaviorist for almost 30 years.
Wow.
So I've got a million dog hours under my belt of working with all kinds of dogs. I mean, everything from anxious and stressed and really aggressive dogs to like the super cute movie dogs on set and teaching skills to dogs and fixing behavior problems. And the reason I started this is because I was doing so many or trying to help so many dogs after divorce who were super anxious, super stressed, not coping with the custody plan that had been put in place. And it was after working with that for years, I thought, okay, somebody with my background in dog psychology needs to work in the divorce space because people are not getting it right with the dogs. They think they are, and their intentions are good, but because they're not quite understanding the impact on the dogs themselves, that's where the long-term problems happen for the four-legged ones.
That is so fascinating. You're right.
You don't think about
they're totally forgotten.
the impact on the pups. Like you just, there's obviously the kids, and then you deal with the pets, but you don't think about how that might affect
the
them.
psychology. That's so fascinating.
All of a sudden, their world is uprooted. They're going to, maybe they're going to two houses, or they're at one house. They're not seeing another owner. Like it's.
So I did a file once, and the couple had a cat and a dog. And so the cat was indoors, so it had to stay where it was. One of the parties was moving out, and they were taking the dog with them. And we had set up like a whole, custody schedule basically of parenting time, whereby one partner had to come into the home to visit with the cat when the ex was not there, because obviously that would be uncomfortable. It was a whole to-do. And so I remember around that time, learning about you and the work you did, I, to be honest, was more concerned with the people. You don't want your ex coming into your home for a couple hours to sit with the cat. Like, what happens when you have a new partner? What else are they doing in there? Yeah. Are they going through your drawers? Like, it's a bit of a blurred boundary. And I was only focused on it from the human perspective, but I never thought, and as a dog owner myself, that's such a shame.
How do they understand? How do they like process a divorce? Like, how does a dog process what's going on?
So a dog doesn't see, they have no concept of divorce. Okay.
Right.
Animals are so adorably simple, and we imagine them to have a lot more understanding than we think they do, especially dogs, because they mimic us. Dogs from a behavior side, we have bred them to copy our moods and mimic how we're feeling. That's what makes them domestic animals. That's why dogs are different than wolves. Wolves don't do that, but dogs do. So it's very easy to imagine your dog understands everything, because when you're sad, your dog gets sad. And when you're excited, your dog gets excited. But they're just little parrots in an interesting way. So the question of divorce, and this is a lot of the work that I help my clients with, is that we as humans put divorce in a very special, unique, difficult category, because for us, it's a very hard time. It's a very emotional, your whole life's just upended in every possible way. However, dogs don't have any concept of what's happening in the divorce time. And when I work with people who have dogs who go through other life challenges, like let's say someone loses their job and they no longer are able to afford their dog and they have to find a new home for the dog. Or if somebody gets very, very sick and they have to give up their dog, or someone gets a job offer to work in Timbuktu and they decide, okay, I'm going to give up my dog in order to do that job. Dogs can handle transitions a lot better than we think they can. And especially when the people involved are okay and they're at peace with it. So to answer your question about divorce, dogs don't put a divorce situation in any kind of special category, because because they're little animals. They're not small people. So what dogs know is my home a stressful one, or is it a calm one? Are the people I'm used to behaving different? Are they treating me differently? Are they sort of, using the dog as an emotional crutch and crying at the dog and asking too much emotionally of the dog because of what they're going through? Right. So that is all a dog can respond to, is what is happening in my life right now and how is it different and do I feel safe or do I not? And then they react from there. So that's the most important thing to understand, is that even if one person has to say goodbye to a dog, if that's the decision and that's the way it goes, the dog is almost always just fine. But people don't want their dog to be just fine. People want their dog to miss them and tragically not be able to cope without them. But dogs aren't actually like that.
So in a case where one person is keeping the dog, let's say, and you're saying that the dog is going to be okay. It's not as doomsday as maybe the other owner thinks it is. How are they going to cope without seeing me every day?
Yeah, like do you have to have like a goodbye kind of ritual or something to like give them closure? Is that really more for the human, or is that for the dog, or is that completely
a human concept?
out of left
I think that
field?
might be like a totally human,
Totally human
Concept,
concept.
yeah.
Totally human concept. So let's take that as, that's a great example. Someone is going to say goodbye to their dog. So there's a million reasons why this can happen. Like I said, it can happen in divorce. It can happen for a million reasons. The way to say goodbye to a dog is to make peace with it in your heart, give the dog a kiss and a hug, and you walk away from that dog. And then you have the big cry when the dog is not there with you.
Right.
It is not fair on the dog to give them that emotional outburst from you. That will create more stress than anything. Okay, so you leave them as kindly as you can and as calmly as you can. And that is the kindest thing to do. And then that guttural sob of knowing you've said goodbye to your dog, it's much better to do it when your dog is not with you, because how's your dog going to make sense of that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so heartbreaking.
Oh my God.
just, I
Every
wish my
Disney movie
snuggly
is playing
thing
in my
happened,
head. The
right?
music is going.
But yeah, we're doing it
That
so
is so-
selfishly. We really are putting our needs above theirs by wanting to have this emotional, heart-wrenching goodbye so that they know how much we love them and we're going to miss them. But really, that's for us. That's not at all in their best interest. So that's really important to know.
Yeah. But it's also, dogs are or cats too, there's such a unique component of like the divorce process, right? Because you can say goodbye to a car, you can say goodbye to a house. Obviously the kids are a different thing. But then there's this animal that you both share that doesn't have quite the same rights as a child does and doesn't quite understand.
Doesn't really have any rights, at least here for us. Like, it's property.
Unfortunately, yeah, in Canada, I don't know what it's like over in South Africa, but in Canada, pets are property and they're treated as such. So if you go to a judge over who gets the dog, it's going to be about, proving ownership.
Yeah, no one's taking the emotional account of that animal.
So they've changed. So I'm very embarrassed to say, I don't know what side of Canada you guys are in. Where are you talking to me from?
We're
right
in
now?
Toronto.
Yeah, Ontario.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in BC, the laws are different.
Oh, good.
On the other side, that dogs are considered sentient beings and they're considered more than just property. So hopefully the laws will trickle over to your side of Canada as well. It seems to be changing all over the world. But yeah, you're right. For now, they are considered property. In most of the world, dogs are considered property. And what's really tricky about that is it's hard to, kind of prove ownership. And oftentimes, people will bring all kinds of paperwork out of the woodwork in a court case, despite the fact that they didn't actually want the dog or they didn't walk the dog or, love it as much as the ex did, but they're just trying to punish their ex, which is a really painfully common sort of thing that happens. So when we say goodbye to a dog, I mean, I'm making light of it. And sometimes I have to say, kind of point out some really hard truths to people about their animals and like, what do you do and how do you handle this in the best way? But all the work that I do is always based on what is best for the dog in the situation, because I can communicate to the people in a different way. Like we are more able to handle what's happening when obviously we know what's going on. You can't say that to a dog because dogs don't speak English. So they don't know what on earth is happening. But the calmer you can be with them, the better.
So a typical file for you then, is it folks arguing over who gets the pet? Is it, as you said, punishment? You have to have it. I'm out of here. It's all yours now.
Or you love it so much, I'm taking it.
Sure, exactly. It could go either way. Are you working with them to kind of understand the psychology behind it so that they can actually make an informed decision? Or is it really just kind of refereeing the two arguing parties?
It's not refereeing. It's really about, let me go back to say that the people who work with me generally want to do the right thing for their dog. Sometimes there's always emotions involved with, it's impossible to work around the emotions. I mean, you can work around them. It's impossible to deny the emotions. But my clients they come to me because they want someone who understands dogs to help them work with a dynamic that's happening. And I tell people when they see me, I say, listen, guys, my client is your dog. I want this to work out mostly for the dog, and secondly for you. And that I'm totally upfront about. And that's why people want to work with me. So we have to have the grown-up discussion about who wants the dog and why. And let's put it out on the table. Are you trying to punish your ex? Is this about something else? If person A wants the dog, is there something that they can give person B that would offset, sort of the emotional value of the dog? There's some ways to be really creative about it. But I think so much of what has to happen during a divorce is there has to be awareness of the undercurrents. You can't just talk about the surface of what's happening, because there's so many things happening below the surface that are old things and old fears and old emotions. And if you don't address those, nothing really goes very well, or it never really resolves itself. So it's a combination when I work with people of acknowledging what is actually going on separate from the dog. What is the dog representing? And usually when we can sort of clear those cobwebs away, then we can get to the honest question of, okay, so this is your dog. It's this sort of breed. It's this sort of age. It has this particular background. What is the best thing for this dog? Really? Like, let's look at this from this situation. And then there's a lot of ways to answer that question. It's not a one size fits all thing, but every dog is different. Every couple is different. The scenario is different. A lot of the work I do has a lot to do with the breeds of dogs, because a dog is not just a dog. A border collie is not a chihuahua and it's not a German shepherd. And what do you do if people have 5 dogs? There's so many layers to it. Can you split up the 5 dogs? How do you know if they're bonded? How do you know if they just live together and they don't care about the other one so much? So all of those things come into play. And by the end of it, we are left with the best outcome that we can for the animal and for the people, whatever that looks like, whatever's needed for them.
I really appreciate that she's doing our job and hers, because I want you to now answer all of those questions. What do you do with a pack? I didn't even think about
more than one.
Right.
And what if they're siblings?
We are terrible interviewers.
I know, we really are. And what if the dogs are like litter mates? You can't separate siblings.
Yeah, like actual siblings versus adopted siblings. Okay, Karis, give us so much more.
And they love each other, and then one person wants to take the dog and one person wants to take the cat.
What do we do?
Oh my gosh.
Help us out.
So what do you do? So let me answer that question first. Like, you can't split up litter mates. That's wrong. You should split up litter mates.
Oh.
Litter mates are the pairs of dogs that are most likely to fight with each other, ironically, if they've grown up with each other. So it's this real fantasy that we have that, if dogs grow up together, they'll be best friends. It's not the case. So when dogs grow up together, if they're both young and there's not an older dog in the house, that pair of dogs is most likely to fight with each other after they go through doggy puberty and they're adults, sort of like older teenager, young adult dogs. So very, very often, if there are siblings, and they don't have to be literal siblings, dog doesn't know what that means. Are they the same maturity level and kind of the same size?
Okay.
It's usually great to split those dogs up because they're often fighting with each other. Never adopt 2 dogs, guys. Okay, just total.
No, this is so. I'm learning so much.
Like, it's one thing if you have an older dog and then you get a younger dog. There's like hierarchy there. It's different.
Okay.
Exactly. And it's not even so much hierarchy is kind of a confusing word. Just think of it as like someone's got to be the guide. Someone's got to be mature. If you have 2 immature people trying to run a ship, it doesn't work. So anyway, that's an aside. But so to the multiple dog question. So what you want to look at is primarily, are the dogs a bonded pair or not? And the way that I describe dogs is dogs can sort of be one of 3 categories with pairs of dogs. They can be best friends. They can be like tolerant roommates, like, well, we just share a space. And they can actually be antagonistic toward each other. A lot of the dogs I work with kind of walk on eggshells around each other, like pairs of dogs. So you sometimes get dogs if there's a history of aggression. That if one dog is very excited, like if one dog is really excited to go on a walk, the other dog is not allowed to get excited. I'm making air quotes, not allowed to get excited because it can cause a fight. So if you have a house where there are dogs where they have to be managed quite a lot, I mean, I had a chat with a family, and people listening are going to laugh about this, but I had a chat with a couple separating, and they have 5 pit bulls, and 2 of them cannot be with the other 3. So they spend their whole life sort of rotating dogs, like those 2 are inside and those 3 are outside. And that happens more than you would think, where dogs can't be together in the house. So if dogs are antagonistic toward each other, or if the one dog's very nervous, it's a great opportunity to separate the dogs and let them live apart. If you have dogs that are a real bonded pair, you will see things like the dogs actively play with each other. So I don't mean one dog tolerates the other one trying to play, but they seek each other out to play with each other. Bonded pairs will feel safe enough to sleep near the other one. They might not actually share a bed, but whenever an animal sleeps near another animal or a person, they feel safe with that person. Otherwise, you wouldn't be all vulnerable and fall asleep next to them.
Yeah.
Do they sleep with each other? And one of the best ways to sort of look at how bonded a pair of dogs are is, do they have the same rhythms? Do they do the same doggy things? Like, wow, we're digging in the garden together, and we're barking at the mailman together, and we're begging for food together, or whatever it is. Or are their lives totally separate? So I have 3 dogs, and 2 of my dogs, they're totally fine with each other, but I think if they didn't ever see each other again, they wouldn't care. Like they don't ever do anything with each other. They have no connection. They like going on a walk with me, but they never play. And then my one dog and my other dog are like best friends, and they do stuff together. And those 2 clearly have a strong bond, and the other one is just there, and they're fine, they're peaceful. But if I was splitting up with my husband, we would probably separate them for that, as for my own personal example. So you can separate the dogs. You just have to look at them not sentimentally, but honestly. And the last kind of tip I can offer about this is, which is also really helpful to understand about dogs as a whole, is that because we have bred dogs to be such radically different sizes and such radically different energy levels, not all dogs are suited to live with each other. So if you have a very, very small dog, like I'll just say you have a Chihuahua, okay? Everybody knows Chihuahuas. They're like the smallest breed of dog. They're very physically fragile. It's very easy for them to get hurt. And they might weigh a few pounds or a couple of kilos, okay? If you have a Chihuahua and you have, let's say, a Great Dane, okay, the biggest dog. And a lot of people, people think it's a kind of a cute pair to get the biggest and the smallest dog. Those 2 dogs cannot play with each other because it's not safe for the Chihuahua. Okay, it's scary to play with something that's 30 times your body weight. And the Great Dane can never use its full body. What dogs want is they want a dog that's the same level of strength so they can throw their body into playing. That's what dogs want to do. Like on a football team, or like, let's say, or any kind of sports team, everyone's kind of the same weight so that you can play hard, whether you weigh 2 pounds or whether you weigh 150 pounds. So if you have a pair of dogs where the breed is a radically different energy level and a radically different size, sometimes those dogs are happier being split up, not because they don't like the other dog, but because the presence of this other dog means they can't fully express their dogginess, because it's actually a bit risky. They can get hurt. They might hurt the other dog.
Yeah, that's a really good thing, because you're right. People do think it's so cute and ironic to have these completely mismatched pairs, but yeah, health and safety first. Sorry,
Yeah. So no, I was just thinking that, like, so people who come to you are obviously coming at this issue from a very different perspective than some of the clients I think that we see, which is the dog is sort of the property. They're not really looking at the best interest of the dog. It's about their perspective, their ego,
best interest,
their best interest, right? Mine. Whereas I think when people have the awareness to come to someone like you who specializes in understanding dog behavior, they're coming at it from more of a dog-focused, dog-centric or pet-centric perspective. Yeah.
They are, yeah. But what's happening now, I think really the whole concept of pet custody and looking at the dogs differently is getting a lot of momentum around. It's just something people are talking about a lot more. So what's happening for me now is I have a lot of attorneys who refer clients to me or mediators in the same way that you'd refer as a tax expert. It's like, okay, we're going to get the dog person in to sort of offer it up. And that really helps quite a lot. It's like I just work in tandem with a lot of other divorce professionals as just to offer some good sound suggestions with it. But it is really true that, okay, all that aside, plenty of people will only want to be selfish about the dog. I mean, it's so sad, but it's so very true. And so if I'm going to offer some challenging advice, but this is the best way I can help the dogs in that situation, that if the one party, let's say, can prove ownership and they're keeping the dog, okay, it's my dog. What people will sometimes do in that situation is they'll say, it's fine to the ex, but you can still visit the dog. Okay. And that is a great way to keep a very unfair emotional connection going. And it's sort of like dangling a carrot in front of that person. It's like, I've got all the power, but I'll let you visit the dog. And if there are no children in the picture, if there's children, obviously they're going to stay in touch. But if there are no human children and someone is offering visits with the dog as a way to stay connected, it'll be better for you and honestly better for your dog if you just walk away. Because it is harder for the dog if you go back for those really emotional visits and then you disappear again. It's harder on them. It's easier. They can settle into their life more if you don't sort of randomly pop back into your life and especially if you're upset or even overexcited, that's harder on the dog. And it's better for your own sanity and your ability to move forward to actually, provided the dog is safe and everything's okay, to actually let it go.
What about people who decide to share the dog, whether they have kids or not, or they don't have kids? They decide they're going to come up with a
they're going back and
parenting
forth.
plan for the dog, and it's going to go back and forth. Does that work?
If they're able to do it in like a non-super emotional way, like if they're just excited to see the dog.
My weekend with the dog, or they split it. I'll have him Thursday to Sunday. You'll have him Monday to Thursday, and we'll do it like that. And we'll share the costs and etc.
Yeah, a lot of people want to do that. I think that's becoming a very common knee-jerk reaction. It's like, okay, well, we're obviously just going to share the dog. It generally works out well in the beginning. And then a lot of dogs get pretty tired of it and pretty stressed by shuffling back and forth. So if people are going to do shared custody, my biggest suggestion is to do longer visits rather than shorter ones. So try like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off kind of vibes. Don't go for a few days here and a few days there, because what's hard for the dogs are the transition times. That's where they're the most stressed. That's what gets the most kind of unsettling for them. So the longer visits are better. That's the one thing. The other thing is that I always recommend to people that you do it as a trial period for a few months and then check in, like how actually is the dog? And if your dog is not coping, are you going to force the dog to live in this schedule? Because some dogs can and some dogs can't. And there's no way to know until you try it for a time. So for the people who are peaceful about it and they're not trying to use the dog to manipulate the other one, those are my suggestions. Longer visits, do it for a trial period, and reevaluate honestly if the dog doesn't seem to be too happy.
And when you say the dog too happy, maybe it's lethargic, it doesn't want to play,
What's
it's
the
maybe not
criteria
eating.
for
What are folks looking for?
So what you're looking for is a change in that specific dog's demeanor and their behavior. So you might see that a real hyper dog starts to become really lethargic, or a dog that was pretty mellow, suddenly pretty hyper all the time and not settled, not sleeping well. Things like dog's appetite changing, not wanting to eat. So some of the people I work with, it's like, how the transition's going? Like, oh yeah, the dog's fine. I mean, he doesn't eat for 3 days when he comes to me, but he's really fine. Those kind of things. The saddest thing to see, which happens quite often for dogs when they do become overwhelmed with transition times, is they start to become a bit aggressive, because aggression is the only way a dog can say stop if you don't listen to the subtle signs. I had some clients who they had a a family dog. It was a small breed dog, and they had 3 kids. And the dog would just move with the kids. It was sort of like they didn't think too much about the dog, but
The
they
fourth
just
child.
decided
Yeah.
because the dog was going to go with the child. And this was not a very, it was a, a contentious divorce, let's say that. And the parents weren't very peaceful with each other. And what was happening for the dog was that whenever he would go with the kids were crying, the kids were upset. It was not a nice day for them. And the youngest girl used to always hug the dog in the car, kind of crying and clinging on the dog. And what was happening was that the dog on the transition day, it was obvious what was happening because of the way the car was being packed. The dog was understanding the pattern, would start hiding in the laundry room because he didn't want to get in the car. And the parents, they were busy. They're worried about their kids. So just sort of scoop up the dog, put him in the car. And after this happened a few times, just before they called me, the last time, they put the dog in the car, the girl hugged him, and the dog just bit her in the face because what else could this dog do?
Yeah, no one was
and
listening.
in hindsight, the dog had been screaming and like dog in his version of it. I don't want to get in the car. He was super tense in the car. He was super tense when the children were hugging him. I mean, also sidebar, dogs don't like to be hugged by kids. It's another conversation. And the dog could not, the dog could no longer handle it. And any dog in the right circumstance can bite if they're pushed to that sort of level of stress. So that dog in the end actually ended up living with grandma, which worked better for everybody. So the dog was fine. And that was sort of the compromise. But that's an example of what you will see from the dog, is that the dog will get a bit growlier on the day when it's transition day. They'll sort of plant their feet in the ground and don't want to be put in the car. They'll shake in the car. So you're looking for signs of stress for the dog, which is primarily that they don't want to get in the car. They don't want to do the transition moment, which they usually figure out what it is. Their general demeanor changes. You can often get dogs who start losing hair, who start licking their bodies kind of obsessively, who don't want to play the same kind of games they used to play. They just often get very, very lethargic. They swing one way. They get very, very lethargic, or they seem to get very anxious and chew on everything or suddenly barking all the time. So those are all ways that dogs say, hey, I'm not a happy dog. I'm stressed about what my life is doing. Another common thing, and this is also a common cat one, is that dogs will start peeing in the house or pooping in the house when they were house trained. And then suddenly they're like, whoa, I'm just going to pee everywhere.
That's what you need
also
when you're
something
going through divorce.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what you need, right?
Do you think that this sort of rise in interest of prioritizing the dog is kind of the way that we now see dogs as family members instead of ones that you would like lock outside and leave, out inside in the winter? Or because there's sort of a rise in couples not having kids as often as they used to. And then so the dog is sort of the replacement, baby, the fur baby versus the skin baby, right? Are you seeing that in your practice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, dogs carry, if there are no children, the dogs fill that same emotional place that couples have. And the attachment that people have to the dog is so much stronger if there aren't children, because I think that attachment is such a natural thing to form. And as someone who has dogs and kids, it's like, I mean, I remember when I was pregnant, I thought, well, gosh, I'll never love anything as much as my dogs. Like I was worried I would, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to love this child so much. And then it's like, lo and behold, I did. So it was okay. But so yes, I think there's 2 reasons why the attitude to dogs are changing. And the one certainly is that a lot of people now are having dogs instead of kids. I mean, I keep getting new statistics about, fewer people are even having children, more people are having dogs or choosing to, having dogs, but having dogs instead of children. It just seems to be a cultural shift that is happening.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any denying that. And because of that, and because of our deepening understanding of dogs and their training and how to look after their, psychologically take care of dogs, there's a real interest and fascination in looking after dogs better. But the downside of that is that we are also humanizing our dogs in such a way that is not healthy for them because they are not children. And if we over obsess on them, that's where you get a lot of dogs becoming anxious. It's not because the dog has an anxiety issue, but it's because their owners won't leave them alone, and they have nothing to do but to then get stressed about that. So no, dogs don't need. They don't need the focus that a child needs. They don't need the time, and they don't. That's where a lot of the challenges come in that you see in a lot of the weird dog behaviors we're getting at the moment.
Like you see people who tell me that like their dogs are on anti-anxiety medication, or their dogs are seeing like a dog psychologist or whatever,
in the stroller,
or they're being pushed in a stroller. like we're giving them human problems.
Yeah. Man.
So that we can baby them and treat them, or what is I don't know what the underlying reason is behind that, but
I think we as people like to see ourselves reflected in our environment.
Yeah.
And I think that part of there's like a downside almost to, not a downside to talking about mental health stuff, but this is what I've observed over the last 30 years working with dogs, is that behaviors of dogs that used to just be considered normal dog behaviors, people are now labeling as like, my dog is really anxious.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, my puppy chewed up stuff. I have a really anxious puppy. It's like, no, puppies chew stuff. Like that's what puppies do.
Right.
And dogs bark, not because they're anxious, but because dogs bark.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a tendency to worry a little bit, people not knowing what is normal for a dog. I had a woman who called me, I don't know, last year sometime, and she said, she can't leave home. She's got this dog and it's so anxious. She can't work. The dog screams all the time. She has to be home all the time. She got this Labrador. He's so anxious. It's just like, please, can I help her? Do I, all these, do you work with separation anxiety? Like, yes, I do. And the first question I said is, okay, how long has this been happening? Like, how old is your dog? And she said, he's 8 weeks old. Oh, I just got him from the breeder 2 days ago. He just screams every time I leave him alone.
he's 8 weeks.
Has an anxiety.
Oh my goodness.
And it was her first, we can laugh about it, but it was her first dog.
Yeah.
And she Googled, why is my puppy screaming? Oh, well, and then separation anxiety. And she was so relieved for me to say, no. All puppies scream. They just have to be taught how to be left alone. He's not broken. Your life is fine. Like but
go back to work
all the time.
Or people like using their dogs as like crutches or excuses to like not function in their own life. Like, I'm sorry, I can't go to work, or I can't go out because my dog needs me.
I know.
But does he? Like, I think he's okay on his own for a couple hours.
And it sounds like being left alone is actually what they need.
He doesn't want you there. Like, leave him alone.
Yep. You do have to teach them. Like, you can't just kind of, there are dogs who don't know how to be alone, but what's really helpful is not to say, my dog has separation anxiety, because then it's like there's a label that's stuck. What you can say is, my dog doesn't know how to be alone yet. I would like to teach it.
Like
And that is a much more helpful attitude, because these things are always fixable. None of it's permanent. It's a habit. It's a lack of training. So you do need to deal with it correctly. I'm not sort of dismissing it and saying, oh, dogs would be fine but so you have to be methodical about the way you teach it, or you teach the dog. But that's when people tell me my dog has an anxiety problem, I say, let's not use labels. Just describe your dog to me. Describe without labeling it. Just describe it. It's like, oh, it's digging in the garden. Okay. Oh, it howls every time it's someone. Okay. And that we can work with. It's like, well, how much exercise is your dog getting? Oh, well, no exercise. Of course it's going to dig in a garden. Yeah. So there's a whole lot of layers to these things. But the main thing people need to understand is what is normal for a dog. Like, if you have a border collie who spins in circles, it's likely just because he's super frustrated, not because he's broken, not because he has a mental
obsessive
illness.
compulsive, or he's got all these human mental health issues that people label their dogs
diagnoses
with.
Yeah. So I think the sort of key takeaway, and jump in if I'm off base, but we need to sort of prioritize them, but understand their actual needs, not project our needs or what we think their needs are onto them. So it's kind of finding that fine balance of, I guess, leave them alone, but also give them what they need. and understanding what those needs are is really
And
crucial.
it's the same thing with like through the divorce.
Yeah, exactly.
Is not using them to satisfy your own
Yeah.
needs.
This has been
the dog
so
first.
informative. Oh my God, I could talk with you all day about dogs. I'm obsessed. And I have
There's so many follow
I have
questions.
so many questions for my own family situation. But I love that you're out here doing this work and informing people, and that you're working with lawyers and mediators to educate them. That's so crucial. So hopefully our listeners are taking a lot away.
Yeah.
Any last bits that we didn't cover that you want to share? Or anything you really want to let all of our listeners know? I'm really putting you on the spot there. No pressure.
I know that's such a big
It's like,
question.
I know,
Oh my
like
gosh,
any
my
last
heart's
minute
racing.
tips, do's. We like do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts.
Anything really you want to
Okay,
share?
do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
Do keep it simple. Okay. If you're going through a stressful time, keep your dog exercised. Make sure that the routine hasn't changed too much. If you are stressed, your dog will probably be stressed too, but your dog will get through it. It's not a permanent thing. Assume the simplest answer is probably the correct one. So if your dog chews up your shoe when you go on a date for the first time after you have broken up with someone, it's not because your dog is jealous. It's probably because your shoe tasted good. And it's that simple. And they like to chew on things that smell interesting. But don't imagine yourself into your dog. Loving your dog means seeing it clearly as a dog and meeting those needs, not pretending it is a child and not pretending that it is a lamp. It's its own special magical thing. And that's why we love them. But we have to treat them as beloved dogs, not imaginary other things.
Yeah. No, that's perfect.
Yeah,
That's
perfectly
beautiful.
put. And
Thank
so,
you.
how do people get in touch with you if they want to use your services?
They can visit my website, which is whokeepsthedog.com. And there I offer any of my new clients a free half-an-hour intro chat. So if anybody listening is curious, who thinks I can help them, they can book a session there and we can see if I can help them or what advice I have. And for any of the attorneys out there and the mediators listening, if you want to know more, we've got a whole lot to talk about.
Awesome. Thank
Great,
you,
yeah.
Karis. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Really appreciate
it.
you
That
taking
was
the
fun.
time and sharing your expertise with us. So thank you.
She's so practical meets educated meets inspirational meets calm.
She's just, you know what it is? She's really refreshing because I feel like in the dog world, it's like dogs are here, kids are there,
Yeah.
and never the two shall mix.
Yeah.
Right? You either I'm all dog and I only care about dogs. I don't even want to hear about human kids
Right.
or human kids. Skin kids, whatever. Skin kids, whatever you call it. Whatever you call it.
Skin
Yeah,
baby versus
skin
fur
babies.
baby.
Right. But she has a really good perspective on the role of both, on the importance of both, on how they both come into the negotiations when there's a divorce and how like sometimes the dog gets put to the side and sometimes they should be.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Because they are dogs.
they're animals.
Yeah. They're
Yes.
animals. And
Yeah.
they're not your kids.
Yeah.
But they have such a huge emotional role in our lives that, you know, people I guess are paying more attention to now.
Yeah. And I think we do look to them to fill an emotional void. Like when you're going through a rough time, you want to have extra cuddles when, I don't know. I just think when you're going through a divorce, it's obviously an incredibly emotional time.
Yeah.
And I love that she was like, leave the dog alone.
Leave the dog alone.
It's not your like support dog. It's not your emotional support animal.
Right.
It's your pet. It's your family pet.
Yeah.
And it has feelings, but not like complex human feelings.
Human feelings. I think so many people
Yeah.
attach, especially if they don't have kids, you attach human feelings and human characteristics to the
Yes.
dog. And like, that's doing them a disservice.
Not
It makes them like
necessary.
anxious and just, parrot your anxious behavior, which I thought was so interesting.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Because you're right, they do. If I'm happy, my dog is jumping all around. If I'm sad, he's kind of like chill.
But he doesn't know why.
He doesn't know why.
He's not actually feeling those emotions. He's just copying yours.
No.
Yeah.
It was, listen, even if we have no listeners, I learned so much. I loved her. I
Yeah.
love the work she's doing. I think it's so important. It's so timely, as we said right at the end, right? People are choosing dogs or pets over children. This world is overpopulated. I'm very happy that some people are making that choice. And listen, not everyone is meant to be a parent, so Godspeed. Off you go without procreating. But when you do have a dog, it does not replace a child.
Right. But it's also the laws haven't caught up with
yes, good point.
with society, right? So in some places, like in Ontario, dogs are property.
Yeah.
And so if you want your dog to be treated not like property, you need to involve a mediator or a pet mediator or someone who can actually give you some, practical solutions for how to share your dog or, give up your dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's sad. It's sad thinking about saying goodbye to your dog and she said it's better to just, maybe give the dog to the other person and not have like all those visits. And it's sad. It is definitely sad.
Because I'm totally projecting my own needs onto all of her clients. But yes, don't be selfish when it comes to the pet.
And that goes with the kids too.
Absolutely.
Right? People fight for their kids when
maybe that's not what they need.
Yeah.
And same thing for the pet.
Yeah.
Anyways, special thanks to Karis. That was a really fun conversation.
This episode was written and created by Alex Howard and Amanda Silver. Produced, edited, and engineered by RTF Productions. Make sure to rate and review our show if you loved it and give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast to stay up to date on all upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening and go easy on us. We're not your ex.